request all the participants to kindly mute your mics for smooth conduct of the section. If you have any queries, you can post it in the chat box. It will be addressed during the question and answer section. Participants are requested to join using your full name. If not, kindly rejoin with us with your full name. Now, I request Professor Parisita Rajan, Principal of Midas, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Ashmi. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Very good afternoon to one and all, and I welcome you all to this wonderful webinar sessions that we are doing every semester in a very systematic, I should say, in a systematic and a very structured manner. So, and our webinars are that way well structured and well programmed. Similarly, now for this semester, we have started with architect Kushal Kumar. Welcome you.
Thank you, sir.
A warm welcome. Happy to have you on board on this webinar.
Yes.
And I welcome our HOD, Professor Jayaraman.
Hello, sir.
Welcome you, sir. I welcome our coordinator, Jabin, and the student coordinator, Ashmi, and all the faculty members and all the students who have joined us today on this favorite subject. Like how it's favorite for Kushal, it's favorite for me also.
Thank you so
Being
much.
a landscape architect, I'm also very fascinated and very happy to hear this from you, and I'm waiting to hear from you, and especially the heritage part of landscape, because heritage part plays a very important role, and definitely all of our students will get benefited out of this particular webinar, because knowing our natural heritage, that's what we are going to, that's what I think Kushal is going to talk about. Various heritages we have in our country, being ancient in style, in system, also ancient in all our customs. Our country has a rich potential of heritage, and the heritage can be classified into built heritage, cultural heritage. The third one is natural heritage. So the landscape becomes the natural heritage of any particular land which is ancient. So the modern land doesn't have this. Modern land is something different. Any country which has been formed 300 years before or 400 years before is totally new, with migrants and people who have migrated from various places or various countries. But our ancient land has people who are native to that land, to that particular place or to the particular location. So that is why we call them as vernacular landscapes. So the vernacular landscapes are once again touching on the heritage part of the particular country. And I'm sure Kushal will add to that and expect that to the best from him, and I'll be happy to learn from him on that. And definitely this is going to help all of us be much more human towards our approach, especially in architecture. So landscape makes people, their approach of architecture much more softer, much more sober, much more subtle. I believe in that, and I've experienced it. I'm confident, and I'm sure that this webinar is going to touch everyone here on that component, making everyone soft towards nature. Thank you.
I will try to do my best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I request Professor Jayaraman, HOD of Midas, to welcome the guest speaker for today's session.
Yeah, thank you, Ashmi. Good afternoon to everyone. It's a privilege for me to introduce the speaker to all the participants, faculties, and students. Architect Kushal Kumar is basically a landscape architect. He is actually an innovative and enthusiastic professional, dedicated and diligent in his works, normally based on his profile I am just wanted to share this one to you all. He has an organized one with a lot of sounds in analytical skills, with their passion towards the field of sustainability, and it's related to planning. He has got a lot of professional skills in terms of technical things, like AutoCAD, Revit, SketchUp, Illustrators, all the things what he wanted to use it for the landscape professional. He is very good in languages like English, Hindi, Bengali, and partly Italian language. He has basically an architect, completed his bachelor's degree from School of Planning and Architecture at SPA Bhopal. He is a registered architect, and he finished his master's from Italy, that is the Politecnico di Milano, from Piacenza, Italy. He did his master's from Sustainable Architecture and Landscape Design. He has got a lot of experiences under the stage from the junior architect till the associate landscape architect. He worked in Bangalore, Archimedes India Private Limited, and he also worked as a research assistant in School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal, India. He was doing his freelancer in a lot of activities, scoping, showing the scope of work of site planning, working drawings, etc. He did his intern from MS Lab Polimi, Milan, Italy, and he has got a lot of experience from that. He also worked as an associate landscape architect in Odisha Bridge and Construction Corporation, Bhubaneswar, India. Other than that experience, he has got a lot of honors by publishing the books and in joint Sprinkler publication with Professor Contin and Pedro Voriz under the chapter called Territorial Intelligence Projects for the Governance for Megalopolis. Also, he is the member of Heritage Cell at OBCC for coordination of projects in Puri and Bhubaneswar. He has presented a paper in conferences like at Xavier's University, Bhubaneswar. Also, he assisted in the fieldwork of the projects like Indian temple production, place patronage at Bhojpur and Udaipur, Madhya Pradesh under the Professor Adam Hardy. I welcome our architect Kushal speaker for this wonderful webinar. He was introduced by our assistant professor Vignesh for us, so that we can share his knowledge to us. Thank you, sir. The floor is to you now.
Thank you so much, sir. Am I audible enough?
Yeah.
Okay. So without wasting much time, I'll open the presentation right now. And, so is the screen visible to all?
Yeah. Yes,
okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will be speaking a little about how sacred landscapes have evolved and how certain sites reflect the specific technique of land usage when we start to call it as a cultural landscape or heritage landscape, how the sacredness came. And and through a small example, which I'm currently developing, it's in the formulation stage. It's in Puri city. So I will give you a little brief about how we approached and how we have gone through it. So I'll briefly talk about what cultural landscapes are, what are the categories of cultural landscapes, and then I'll move on to my project, which is in Puri, and it's called Pramod Udyan, which means the pleasure garden of the Lord Jagannath. So what are the literature references we took and how we came to a proposal. So UNESCO has a very specific genre for cultural landscapes. Like it lists in the UNESCO World Heritage List. There are many sites which are World Heritage. They have come in the World Heritage List because these are certain sites which they reflect specific techniques of land use and they guarantee a sustainable biological diversity. And some of them are associated in the minds of the people through beliefs or maybe artistic ways or traditional customs. They embody somewhere an exceptional spiritual relationship between human and the nature. So to reveal, so cultural landscape exists a variety of landscapes that are representative of the different regions in the world. And they are throughout the world because tribes have evolved regions of the world. If you see Machu Picchu in Peru to the cultural landscapes of Tokyo and then to the Ayers Rock in Australia, they have always have a significant role to play in the evolution and how people have oriented themselves towards it. So the combined works of nature and humankind, they express a long and intimate relationship between people and their natural environment. And to protect these living traditional culture and preserve the traces of those which have disappeared, we try to make them as a heritage and try to build sites for knowledge as well as for people to know our past. So cultural landscapes, there are broadly three different categories. Uh, Before that, I would like to tell you that they are sustainable practices. They are protected, and they have a spiritual relation sometimes in nature, and they contribute to the modern techniques of sustainable land use, and that can maintain or enhance the natural values in in a landscape territory. So there are three different types. One is the clearly defined landscape created intentionally by man, which are the gardens, the park landscape constructed for aesthetic reasons. Uh, there are hundreds of examples from a neighborhood to a city level or to a international level, like the Highline Park of New York to a small neighborhood park in your community. And then there are organically evolved landscapes. They have resulted from initial social, economic, administrative, or religious imperative and has developed its present form by association with and in response to the natural environment. These are they may be bucolic in their type or they can be prehistoric. So there are two types here. One is the fossil landscapes and one is the continuing landscapes. So when we talk about fossil landscapes, they have an evolutionary process and has come to an end. And sometime in the past, either abruptly or over a period, if you see the sites of Pompeii or Mohenjo-daro in India, or if you see these kind of landscape, they are significant distinguishing feature and they're still visible in the material form for us to understand. And then the second is a continuing landscape in which one retains the active social role in contemporary society. They're closely associated with the traditional values of the and the ways of the life of the people. And they have a evolutionary role to understand how humans have evolved over time. If you see, I'll give you examples later. And then is a associative cultural landscapes, and they have evolved due to powerful religious or artistic cultural associations. So here we can see like how religion over time has evolved into a landscape and how people have decided these to be sacred and we try to make it as a heritage. So these are a few examples which I would like designed and created by man, the Mughal gardens, the English gardens, the French topiaries, the Zen gardens in Japan. Some of the few examples. The organically evolved relict, a very UNESCO World Heritage Site in Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh. You can see on the rightmost corner, you have like the prehistoric paintings of the people, the early men who used to stay in this place and how they have made caves out of these and how they have closely related with the landscape. And third, and the other part of this is the continuing evolved organic landscape. This is the Val di Orcia in Toscano, and these are very famous worldwide. They are also again in the list of heritage sites, and they are known for how they cultivate grapes and how they extract wine in the same old traditional manners we practiced during the Renaissance time to now, and how the shaping of these kind of landscape has is somewhere between the tradition and modernity. So these are examples of evolving patterns of landscapes, and then these are another example of the associative cultural landscape is the Govardhan Hill in Mathura. They have they have been associated with the life of Krishna, and you can see them in the Rajputana style of paintings to the Pattachitra paintings of Odisha, and even today people go to visit these sites. Sorry, they have like pilgrim association with them. They are sacred in nature. People try to do a parikrama around it, and to they have certain beliefs that doing a parikrama around it will remove their sins, and it has some kind of a make-believe philosophy for them. So these tend to become a part of our heritage. So what a sacred landscape is a combination of absoluteness of space, relativeness of places, comprehensive of landscape. Altogether, it's wholeness, carrying the inherent imposed spirit of holiness. And they can be called sacred schemes. They are regulated and survived by faith involved in the sacred rituals. Because many of these places, they have also ritual significance. If you see a small kund in the temple kund is a part of the traditional landscape. It is a part of the city. People use it for their sacred rituals. Earlier, they were also used on a daily basis. So, what I would like to tell about through a project of mine, which I am currently developing here, and this is, I'm not the sole person here. We have several consultants along with us from Delhi who are also developing this. So, this is Pramod Udyan, or the Pleasure Garden of the Lord Jagannath, and situated in Puri, one of the Char Dhams of the Hindus. So we talk about the site when we see here, like the NH 316, and then from here we have a new road is being built, which is a Sri Setu. It's a flyover bringing you to the town of the Puri town, and this particular flyover ends in a proposed multi-level car park, which is here JBPC, and adjacent to it is the Pramod Udyan. So the site of Pramod Udyan, when you see, is like it's a water body area. When you see the green patch, the L-shaped green over the junction is a wetland. Then you have built water tanks, which is the Narendra Pushkarini here. You have a river flowing, which is not very clear. I'll show you with the cursor that this is a river. We are trying to revitalize the river as well, and the river flows in this manner. So this is a whole 42-acre site is developed by the Hidayah scheme, but somehow we still want to develop as a sacred landscape. And it is just along the Badadanda, which is the grand road on which the chariot festival takes place annually. So I'll talk a little about what Puri is. So Puri is a dham and very sacred to the Hindus. It has, like you know, there are 4 dhams, the Rameshwaram, Dwarka, Puri, and in the north is the Kedarnath. So the Sri Kshetra, also called Puri, is also known as the Shankha Kshetra, because Shankha meaning the conch, and the whole concept of the city has evolved around the shape of a conch. The lower base is the sea, the Bay of Bengal, and then there are several of these ritualistic sites or sacred sites, or even the burning hearts or the crematoriums are sacred here. So everything forms a part of this Shankha Kshetra, which is called Puri. So if I show it in the map, the cultural heritage structures, so all these red here which you see are the cultural heritage sites, and they are associated with the people in some way or the other, even for the locals, for some particular sects, or sometimes it's for pan-India. You have several mathas, you have several dharmshalas where people come, you have several water bodies which are considered to be sacred, and they are considered to be like Godavari or Krishna or the Ganges. So if you see this white patch, this is the Jagannath temple, and this is the grand road leading to the Gundicha temple. This is a 3.2 kilometer road on which the annual Rath festival takes place. In the center, in this part, is our just a moment. Yeah. So this is the site of our Pramod Udyan, or the pleasure garden. You see the Narendra Pushkarini, and this is the river, another river which goes into the sea, and we are trying to develop a connection between these 2 rivers as well. And here is the Sri Setu coming and entering into the JBPC MLCP site. So this park, I wouldn't say park, but the pleasure garden of Lord Jagannath, but also it's a being in the core city center, it functions as a urban park as well. But to develop this, we had to go through several sacred scriptures, how these have been described, and we tried to give uh, references from the Skanda Purana, which was written in around 8th century. So there are several chapters on the second phase of the Skanda Purana. I have 49 chapters on the Puri Odisha region. So here it talks about how the Jagannath cult started and how people started embracing Jagannath as a supreme lord and the king, and how uh, the surrounding region of got associated with the cult of Jagannath. Along with this Skanda Purana, we also followed the Gita Govindam by Jayadev. He was a great poet of Sanskrit, and he wrote this epic poem, Gita Govinda, on the life of Krishna and Radha in the 12th century AD. And Jayadev was himself from Puri, so he has completely described in his poem how the what trees have been planted, how people are sitting, how people are enjoying the landscape. So we had to take both of these into our study, and then we came to a conclusion. This was brought to us by the king of Puri and everything. So we have cultural advisory committee who advised us on these things. So if you are aware of how the Jagannath temple evolved in the Shankar Kshetra, was a Nila Parvat, which is a blue mountain on which there is a banyan tree, or the Akshar Vat, which is called here, is a life-giving tree, and under that tree was a blue rock. So that was the whole concept of development of the Shankar Kshetra of Puri. And then you have dense forest, and the forest was the divine protectors. And you have also certain Ashtashambhus and the Ashtashaktis, which are in the traditionals, like the Ashtashambhu meaning the 8 forms of Shiva and the 8 forms of the Shakti, which is the female deity. So they as a sacred divine protectors, and then you have a dense forest around, because back in 1,000-2,000 years, it was all a forested region. So the whole concept was trying to develop, like, not everyone is allowed to go inside the Shri Mandir in Puri. So we tried to bring out the deity from inside the temple and be it like a display in a display area where people from all sects of life, they can come and enjoy time in the landscape along with their revered deity. So this was the concept. And you have in the Gita Govinda by Jayadev how you have water bodies, how people are moving in boats, how they have creepers coming in, and how people are dancing around these and enjoying time in the pleasure garden. So this is a famous form of art form here in Odisha called the Pattachitras. And we also took inspiration from Vrikshayurveda written by Surpala in 1008, 10th century. So here he describes pleasure garden. So I'll give you some time to read what a pleasure garden described by Surpala is. You can go through, and I'll also read aloud. Garden houses should be protected from the sun and thick foliage of Atimukta creepers. You have creepers over garden houses with honeybees hovering around them and flowers strewn over. Like whenever the breeze comes from the sea, you have flowers. They all uh, trees are swaying with flowers, and you have a feeling of pleasure in that. At places, beautiful ponds adorned with swans to be made, trees planted on the borders of these ponds, so that when the flowers fall, they fall on the waters and they are floating on their water body. And these are like, they are the eyes in the form of flowers. And then there are long water bodies, and they are free from aquatic life, and you have the pleasure of boating in them, and the flowering trees all around it with the lotus sprouting somewhere, and you have blue lotuses. They look like maidens, black pupils. Even at some places, the ponds may be constructed holding the reflection of the garden. It's a low lying, and from a nearly high land, you can see the whole reflection of the mountain on the water body, and you feel like you are inside a water mist of water, and a garden is growing over you. So these are the Surpala's description of pleasure garden. And trees with white crystals adorned with plantain trees, and they have ample of breeze flowing with fragrant flowers. Some places there should be a well also. Like he even described how the watering has to be done for the trees. And the last 2 points where he gives at regular interval a powder of few of these kind of plants and fruits should be put in ample quantity in the water because they will reduce the turbidity, the bitterness, the salinity, and the foul smelling, and it becomes tasty, clear, fragrant, and it's a treated water in the park. So we took all these forms and then we derived to a concept. So if one picture describes a pleasure garden, it can be something like this, which is we find it in all the details by uh, Raja Ravi Verma painted in this kind of landscape settings, which is a sacred to our ancient Indian beliefs. So coming to the site again, when we talk about this 42-acre site with the Grand Road on the south, and then you have this uh, large water body, which is again sacred in its nature. This is the wetland area. Another sacred water body is this one called the Indradyumna tank, and you have the MLCP coming, and this is the hunting. It's called Bento Pokhari. Pokhari meaning tank and Bento means hunting. So when we see it in ancient, maybe these were the hunting grounds of the kings at that time, and they are still preserved in that form. So I'd like to briefly describe what are the surrounding features are. You have the Jagannath temple, the Gundicha temple, the railway station. This is the site, and how we are connecting the river, the Kanchi and the Makala, and you have the important sacred tanks here and how we are developing this in the center of the city. So when we see this, this was all developed by under the Hidayat scheme. Some community who have been mispeaks from around the Sri Mandir. So what we decided to do was at the location B is a important mutt. Mutts are um, like a sacred stay of some saints who live here and they have given their life to the Jagannath temple. So they have made a whole sanctuary out of it and they have their own importance with the temple. So this mutt is closely related to the land and we wanted to create a connection between the tank, this Pokhari and the Narendra tank and the site. This is the entrance. This is the only entrance point to our uh, pleasure garden. D is the Bento Pokhari, the hunting uh, ground and the hunting tank. And then C is a small temple of Sugriva, and you have martial art forms being practiced here. So all these somehow relate to us as sacred. You have yearly functions of Jagannath happening over here, here in these areas. So what we developed and proposed was the yellow part is the proposed pilgrim center, which is the MLCP, and the green area is um, the whole Neelachal Parvat, the mountain which we want to create here. This to be demolished because it has no uh, historic significance and it's completely out of context. So you have water bodies, several water bodies in the site which we have kept and want to develop, and conserving of the temples, revival of the mathas, and the area has to be developed through enclosed buildings. We want to develop the grand entrance to these, and then you have a vehicular access to the pilgrim center from back behind as well as from the front, and then you have a connection with the Narendra tank. So this is the grand road. This is 25 meters wide, and we want to. This is the matha which I was talking about. And these two buildings they have little significance in the region, so we want to take over these and give a grand entrance to our park, which has the design has been evolved by a famous sculptor who is no longer with us after due to COVID, and he's a Padma Vibhushan, and he has designed this gate, so we want to preserve this as well. And this was our proposal. So a new approach connecting the Narendra Pushkarni with our Grand Road, and you have a vehicular access on this road only. And this is the grand entrance which we are talking about as an amenity center. We have cloakrooms, you have uh, toilet facilities, restrooms for people. After they have walked 400 meters from the temple and they have approached here, they can have a sit here and relax and then go into this nice landscape area. So we did a hydrological study of it to understand how the flow of the water takes place, because this, if you remember the site, this is all marshland. So all the water have a tendency to flow from the south towards the towards the northwest. So we have tried to develop water rivulets and channels, and these form our whole the high points. Like we would like to dig these up and make the same soil can be used to make the mounds here, and then develop the landscape all around, which is which I will talk about again. So we have zoned it. This is the place for the Chandan Yatra associated with the tank. Then you have the MLCP, the Bento Pokhari zone, the entrance zone, and then you have fragrant flowers. Here people can walk around. This is the Jagannath Vallabh Math. And then we have proposed a Natyashala, which is an open air auditorium kind of a place for people to congregate. And then you have very local species planted here. You have the Suri Mandir preserved, the Nilagiri Kanan, the mountain which we were talking about, how the replica of the Jagannath temple being replicated here in a very open form. And then we have some medicinal zones, and then we have the peripheral planting, the forestry. So what we intend to do was, like, since this is a 42-acre site, we want to develop a outer peripheral golf cart for access, and then inside will be all tertiary paths for people to leisurely walk around. When we see, also I wanted to point out how the shapes of the pathways are in the Indian traditions. We don't have straight paths or paths cutting at right angles. What we have are meandering pathways, meandering water bodies, and then you come across like the pathway ends into a water body. You go across through a bridge. You have waterfalls. So nothing is sharp. Everything is organic, developed by nature, so that it looks that nature has grown over it. So this is our site plan. If you see, you have the entrance and a nice water body to welcome you, and then you move around. And this area is with a thick foliage. You have to hide this new construction happening over here, the MLCP. And then you have this area is a high mound on which the replica of Jagannath will be there, and then you have the Natyashala, like the annual the chariots will be placed here for people who could not come during that particular phase of Rath Yatra can come and visit here all along, and this will form the backdrop of the open air auditorium. And then you have these water bodies. They have been again reshaped, and they are no more rectangular or square or very rigid. They are very organic and free flowing. So, and here you have the marshland on which we wanted to make some decks over it, which people can walk around and have a look of view the Jagannath temple towards the south. So these form those places from where you can see the temple as well. And then what we was talking about, how the deities have to be placed as it is placed inside the temple. The 8 forms of Shiva, the 8 forms of Shakti, inside the Jagannath temple you have the Jagannath and his brother and sister, and the Navagraha and Mahalakshmi and the local deity as well. So these are also placed inside the park, but not very symmetrically as in this temple, but in a very leisure form, like at different places. And the devis will have a canopy in a very Kalingan style of architecture, and while the forms of Shiva will be in the open. So a few sections of the site, and you have In the background of section 2, you see the MLCP being constructed, and in the last section, you see the mountain on which the Jagannath statue will be there, and on the far left corner, you see the Ratha being placed, and this is the stepped. It's not stepped, but a very gentle slope, so that people can sit around or lie down as per their wish on these lawns and observe some function happening here. A little zoom in on these areas, how the parikrama paths, the planted mounds, and different statues of the lords are placed. You have waterfalls, and you have these are a few other images you can see at the backdrop. The MLCP hidden over by the tall bamboo and palm trees. This is the same. This is the Natyashala I was talking about, where the people can be. You can have practices of or a dance form, Odissi, or some other form of dance to display to give a storyline of how the Gita Govindam or something like that can take place here. So this is one of those, and the image which I referred to, something similar by Raja Ravi Verma or something. We want to make a replica of like flowering trees giving shade over these water bodies, and to that you have swans and water lilies and lotuses and blooming here and there. So all that, then you have the medicinal herbal garden, because as per stories, you have Jagannath falls ill for 21 days, and you have very Ayurvedic oils extracted, and then the Lord wakes up from his 21 days of sickness. So all those kind of plants can be planted in these areas, and people can go and have a look, or maybe sometimes you can even get a bottle of it. So talking about the materials, we wanted to use only the locally available ones, the indigenous condylite stones and the laterite stones, which is in abundance here and can be sourced from like 10-20 kilometer regions. And then this is the Jagannath arboriculture which we try to use, and the species have been taken from the same Gita Govindam and Skanda Puran, like which are the trees being planted, and this is a list of the trees. And they are all from the very local indigenous species of trees. Thank you. Did I bore everyone? Nobody speaks.
No, sir.
Thank you so much, Architect Kushal Kumar sir, for giving such a delighted and fascinating section. Now it's time for question and answer section. I request all the participants to use raise the hand option available at the bottom of your screen. I'll call out your names. At that time, you can unmute yourself to ask the question to the presenter, or you can use chat box to post your questions.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Can you hear me, Kushal?
Yeah, I can hear you.
A very nice presentation.
Thank you.
I would like to just get some inputs on the kind of material, especially the material for hardscape, the or the some kind of a palette you would have had, no, for the material for hardscape.
Yeah.
What is that all about? Is it going to be materials which are going to be sourced locally, which are very local to that particular region? So can you just throw some light on that? What kind of material selection has been gone for the paving, railing, and all that?
So what we have used here, you have abundance of laterite stone here and condylite, which is a kind of a hard stone, and it's difficult to work on with, but they're really good for paving and cladding on the walls and surfaces. So most of our hardscapes are being used made out of condylite stones and laterite stones. So they are very locally available. You have quarries like in Bhubaneswar or in parts of Puri. So they are not more than 20 kilometers. The quarry sites are not more than 20 kilometers is what we have kept into our mind.
Because see, walking on a laterite is always risky, no? Because the stone is always has a lot of sharp edges in it. Rather, the particles are so sharp and that's thing. So how are you going to finish that? What kind of a finish you're looking for, and how it's going to be, because of the porosity and because of those the ferric content is more in laterite stone. The iron content is more in a laterite stone.
So if you happen to know, like we have three kinds of laterites. There are like two basically in broad classification. One is the fine ingrained ones, and one we have the more porous ones. So what we are trying to use here, which is more available here, is the fine pores. They are really strong, sturdier compared to the loosely grained porous ones. And since it's not a sacred area, like sacred meaning not a temple site, so people have the freedom to walk in their shoes and slippers and move around. So
And that is why I'm asking you that, because even people, when they go to the laterite forts of Goa, they are cautioned always, be careful.
Yeah.
When they rub against the wall, they will get scratches on the skin.
Yes. So
And
here
even
we don't have
walking-
much walls. It's more of pathways.
Even walking on a barefoot on a lateritic surface,
It's
especially in the, very difficult. So
Yeah.
that is why I asked you that.
So places where you have to go, where, like the points where I told that there are statues of Jagannath and all the Devi and Devdas. So you don't have what we call as Pran Pratishtha done here. Like you don't have, the deities would not be given a life. They are just for show. There will be no worshipping allowed. You cannot approach the deity. No one can put any kumkumam or things like those, and no worshipping is allowed here. So it's just for to be in this scenic site.
And can you throw some light on the planting palette? What is that you're going to adopt here?
Yeah.
Whether it's going to be based on the regional plant material, or how is it, like, what is that approach that you're taken for the planting design?
Yes, so I'll show it again. So if you see, all the plants are from the Jagannath arboriculture. So we have taken all these plant species from the temple history and these books of Skanda Purana and Jayadev's Gita Govindam. And only those plants, no foreign species, only the local ones. And they have been, like your forest trees here, you have orchards, you have flowering trees, flowering shrubs, flowering herbs, all these. And if you know Ketki, these plants, they have a special, they grow in abundance here on the roadside. They are very useful to extract flavors. We have a very, which we give in our local biryanis. We use these flavoring agents, and then you have flowers. These are used, like all these matas I was talking about, they have a specific connection. Like sandalwood is taken from a particular mud, so they are assigned to give the paste to the temple. So the matha is only using chandan, and they have their whole daily ritual based on the sandalwood, making paste or powder. So one mutt is completely devotionally involved in this thing. Somewhere you have only the white flowers are from one particular mutt. One mutt is only giving you the oils, the essential herbs. So these are all documented over the years, and we have used. We have also made our list, and we have tried these into our. Like these are special plants which oils are extracted, and during this period where the Jagannath fall ill, we use these kind of oils to heal him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Thanks for the clarification too.
thank you, sir.
Any more questions? Thank you so much, sir, for being patient enough to answer the questions in depth.
Thank you
Now,
so much.
yes, sir. Now, I request our Assistant Professor Vigneshwaran to deliver out of thanks.
I think some more questions are there. I think before that,
Yeah, Meenakshi Prasad.
I think there are some more questions people are waiting for. I think I don't know.
Yeah, there is one raised hand of Meenakshi
Yes, I could
Prasad.
see why actually this one, like I could see that. I think any more questions, please go ahead. Let us
Hello,
close it
can
after
you hear
that.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, from your presentation, I could understand that your belief in the religious books and the connection of landscape details with the religion. My question is it mandatory for a landscape architect to understand and believe in this epics and other religious things, or is it how important it is for a landscape architect to be sensitive to all these religious beliefs and their connection with the plants and flowers? Because in Auroville, if you could see Mother Meera, she has written a book on the quality of each flower to the emotions and the fragrance, all those things. She spiritually connects the flowers with the process. It's actually a spiritual process to use the flowers in puja. So how important it is for a landscape architect to understand these and believe in these rituals?
Thank you, Meenakshi. It was really a challenging thing, and I wanted to tell you about this. Like when we started the process last year during the COVID time, uh, our consultant did the same Mughal garden sort of a thing. They made a huge water tank in the end, and then you made two side tanks, and they just named it like one is Jagannath, one is Balbhadra, and one is Subhadra tank. And they have no connection to it. So when our cultural advisory team, which is headed by the Gajapati here, so he asked, these are small incidents I'm talking about. So he asked, how do you connect these rectangular tanks with the deities? Either they should be having those flowers only, like blue is for the main deity, white is for Balbhadra, and the pink is for the Devi. So if you have those, and then secondly, you don't have straight paths in a traditional Indian landscape. It's all organic. So all these ideas, it all came from reading these. I would not call them like spiritual books, but these are also we can think them as a epic poetries, how they described it, like in the 5th century landscape. We cannot get an idea because we cannot time travel. So these help us to time travel to those eras. And you have a whole list of books. The whole list of trees, how they are used. I don't know what is the special features of these particular trees, and like you don't sit under these particular trees because you have snakes lying over there. So they have different things associated with each trees. So we have taken all those, incorporating all those things, and then also from Dehradun, the Botanical Institute, we took examples from their, we took help from their library as well. And then we have to have a balance of the mythology, epic is written, and then there's traditional science, scientific knowledge as well. So only with the balance of those we can come to a point where we can uh, include sacred landscape in a modern way.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kushal. It was
Thank you so much.
Why I asked this question is because people nowadays are telling Ramayana and Mahabharata are also myth. It didn't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, so many people are believing that it's just a story and it's not a
No,
fact.
no, we have to go there because these are our backgrounds.
I just wanted to know the significance of reading those epics. Yeah,
Thank you. I see one more hand, Raja Praveen.
Yes, sir. Hi, sir.
Hello.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. My doubt is, uh, how about doing masters in landscape architecture in India? What's the scope? How's the scope? Or otherwise, doing in abroad?
Okay, Raja Praveen, I would like to say that we have very different aspect of seeing landscape in India and in abroad. Not very different, but you have to find your own focus. Do you want to come back and see it in the what they miss from our heritage and something like those? Because when we study the plant species there, we cannot replicate those things here. But what we can definitely replicate is how, even in the example I showed you about the Tuscany, the continuing landscape, which we are trying to demolish here. Like people there, they really value their continuing landscape, which is in the fields of Lombardia or Toscana or all the valleys of the Valley of Flowers and the Dolomite and those places. They they have those same agrotourism evolved, which we are trying to follow now, and it's really important to develop these things because these are our heritage, and it's more or less similar. We are going into the modern forms of practices of agriculture. But what I see there, you have wines and olive oils and cheese being made in the very traditional form, which was practiced, I mean, like 800 years or during the Renaissance times. So we have to,
Okay.
one thing is learning and then practicing in a completely different scenario here in India.
Okay, sir. But in my point of view, actually, there is a little bit scope only in India for architecture itself. So how about landscape architecture has scope in India? How about that? Because most of the rural areas, rural
Uh,
people doesn't know
uh,
about architecture.
Raja, I can
Not
tell you that
not only rural areas, but also the major city corporation and town municipalities. There are not awareness of architecture existing.
It is coming slowly because earlier, even when I was practicing in 2014-15, what we were given was a completely developed site, and then you have to plant trees around and make it beautiful. But what I'm seeing now here, while I'm practicing in formulation of projects, is first thing we as landscape architects and planners try to understand the territory and the intelligence of the territory, the genius loci has to be understood, and then only you can come to a point or put a project which is off the site and it belongs to the site. Otherwise, it's very difficult to call it a sustainable practice. Slowly, it is
Okay.
coming into the scene, but it will take a little time.
Yes, yes, yes,
I hope I have
okay, thank
answered
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir,
Yeah,
yes, sir. Thank you, thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. I just want to add one more question. Sorry
Yes,
for
sir.
taking time. We have derelict land in India, right? There are so much land which are not used, but still that land can be effectively used. I just want to have your experience how derelict lands are utilized in Italy and other foreign European countries, so that our students can get to know that how landscape is important for Indian context based on these derelict lands.
The bucolic landscape which we are talking about,
Yeah.
uh, people associate themselves there. It's not just a part of one family or one particular paid people. Even we as students used to go there bicycling on the highway because it's so approachable, and then you can give some time into the farm, you can get the harvest out of it, You can carry a bunch of grapes freshly harvested.
Okay, sir. Third year, fourth
And
year.
those things can be like taken.
First
So
actually
in
second is when the 18th அப்புறம் இருந்தா okay.
so we have to associate themselves even like they are being practiced in Uttarakhand and Himachal. People are bringing this agritourism into the culture. And also in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, I have seen there are many an agrotourism being carried out right now. So maybe with those kind of things, people can. And moreover, here the culture is more of striving towards a good life. They already have a good life and then now want to spend it leisurely. So there's a very much difference in the context of culture and what we are aiming for.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Gopalan sir.
Yes. No, almost his presentation was excellent. But how much the young, like our institution, other temple architects, other landscape, how young generation is value and they protect these places?
So only if we are much aware of our past that we can evolve ourselves into it. It cannot be something on only in specific terms we can associate with these things. Like as I was talking about the genius loci, this thing of sacred landscape cannot be formulated in a IT park because most of the Indian cities we are just urbanizing like something. This is another part of my research where I want to deal with how peri-urban areas are just exploiting their landscapes. So we have to understand that part of the whole scenario before we deal with the sacred landscapes.
In Tirupati, recently they initiated to plant that holy garden, the new landscape with plenty of variety of trees they planted. Then they created new holy garden in Tirupati mountains to herbal trees and all. So in every temple we have Tala Vriksha. Even
Yes.
in Golden Temple, when the first guru planted the first tree, when I was in Amritsar, the tree almost broken, but they given support and all. It is alive still. It is, I think, is more than 500 years old tree. Not only in India, all over the world, the
Yes.
tree the first structure which alive structure to protect and pray.
Definitely.
Water, mountain, and all secondary. The leaf is the only one is a live structure. So you travel all over the India. You visited how many states?
Not much. I really want to travel more, but I have
You
been.
been to Tamil Nadu, Pondicherry?
Yes, yes. During our college time, we had a whole trip to Tamil Nadu. From apart from Chennai, I think we traveled everywhere. Other major cities like Madurai, Trichy, Rameshwaram, Srirangam, Kanyakumari. And when I was working in Bangalore, I visited Ooty and Coimbatore.
So in ancient time, these all flowers and all, no, the settlement surrounded by temple, these flowers for puja and it is a voluntary contribution or the temple people. So now we have commercial horticulture and all, we have plenty variety of flowers. So even we are exporting, so you cannot supply, for market. So now the after industrial revolution, this culture is totally different. Am I correct?
Exactly. But also that ancient culture is still thriving. You see markets flooded with, you have flower markets now, and then you have like how the West developed the tulip gardens.
Yes. The
So
tulip garden, see, that's why I'm telling. See, I travel all of the whole European countries. When in winter, they stay indoor. So in
Yes,
summer star they come out. So they want to connect with nature and fresh air. And the population very less. Their education and the parenting is different. So they want to connect with nature. So
exactly.
like the same in ancient time till we have that is in Indian temples. So that is a meeting place. So where you meet temple and surrounding temples. So in Europe, they meet such places, so they protect all these places. And also tulip and all, now there is a huge market, they export. Switzerland,
Yes,
all countries is even Turkey also they are exporting.
yes, sir.
Nothing else.
Even
So
Bangalore,
nice.
we have
What?
Bangalore. We also see like flowers are getting exported to different cities in India as well as abroad.
No, in India also flower market is huge. Apart from that,
Yes,
we are
yes.
exporting. That's why I told it. It's a commercial
Right.
through gardening. We produce and we consume ourselves, and also we export. Other small countries. Okay. Anyways, we enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you
We
so
hope
much.
wait for next any other upgraded version or
I would love to share with you.
yes. No. Next presentation. We hope we will meet again.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you all
Okay.
the best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being patient enough to answer the questions.
Thank you
Uh,
so much.
Now I request our Assistant Professor Vigneshwaran to deliver out of thanks.
Yeah, Ashmi. Thank you, Ashmi.
Thank you.
Yeah. I first of all thank architect Kushal Kumar. Uh, like I asked him like very last moment without any hesitation he agreed for the presentation and he prepared a wonderful presentation. I know it is he's being always a good storyteller and
Thank you,
he is
Vicky.
also one of the one of the reason for me to do the masters in landscape architecture. When we were roommates batchmates, you used to explain about each and every plant. That's how I got inspired and get into this landscape architecture and we have been traveled together a lot many places from Kanyakumari to Agra, that's Bhojpur and the other places. He always have that story with him. He always understand that and he whenever I just listen to him whenever I go
Thanks, Vicky.
to
Thanks too much.
to him. The same way he has done today's presentation and I was lastly met him at Odisha only, so I
Yes.
was not much aware of that Puri Jagannath. I just visited and came back, and today's presentation was like one of the highlight. And this is the same way that my students, like landscape design students, gonna do their study on their heritage sacred landscape in Tamil Nadu. I hope you deliver such a wonderful presentation. I thank you personally as well. Uh,
Thank you,
and
Vignesh.
I thank our HOD and principal for creating this platform to make him present in a wonderful on this wonderful and to the team, Jabin ma'am, Ashmi, and everyone, students as well. And thank you so much, and my faculties also. Yeah, thank you, Kushal ji.
Thank you, Vignesh. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening me. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you. I'll hang now.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Kushal.
everyone. Uh, we appreciate that you're being here and making the section more interesting. See you all soon in the next section, soon in Midas, on the topic hospital planning. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Sacred.
Thank you, everyone.